Commander Zek Lash of the Vel'tari Imperial Fleet stood before his assembled officers, all four of his arms crossed in what any human would recognize as supreme arrogance. The holographic display behind him showed a small, blue-green planet spinning lazily in the void. Earth, they called it. How quaint. "Gentlemen," Zek Lash began, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension reserved for discussing particularly dim-witted prey animals. "Behold our next conquest. The third planet of this unremarkable solar system. Population. Approximately 8 billion of the most pathetically fragile creatures the galaxy has ever produced." A ripple of amused chittering passed through the assembled officers. Navigator Thrix, whose species had evolved natural armor plating that could deflect plasma bolts, tilted his massive head thoughtfully. "Sir, our scouts report they have no exoskeletons whatsoever. Their skin is soft, completely unprotected." Indeed. Zek Lash's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. No natural weapons either. No claws, no venom sacs, no acidic secretions. They've somehow managed to become the dominant species on their planet, despite being walking meat sacks with delusions of grandeur. Weapons Officer Golnox, whose own species could regenerate lost limbs in mere hours, shook his head in apparent disbelief. "The biological scans are fascinating, Commander. Their cellular repair mechanisms are painfully slow. A minor wound that would heal on any of us in minutes takes them weeks to recover from. And their lifespans?" He paused for dramatic effect. "Barely a century. Most die of old age before they reach 200 standard years. Primitives," Zek Lash declared with satisfaction. "They've barely mastered interplanetary travel within their own system. Their weapons are still chemical-based projectiles and crude explosives. Meanwhile, we've perfected energy manipulation across 17 different spectrums." The holographic display shifted, showing tactical readouts of Earth's military installations. Red dots appeared across the planet's surface, marking what human governments proudly called their advanced defense systems. To the Vel'tari, they looked about as threatening as a child's toys. "Our intelligence indicates they've divided themselves into nearly 200 separate territorial groups," Thrix reported, consulting his datapad. "They spend more time fighting each other than developing any coherent defense strategy. Classic pre-spaceflight civilization behavior." "Marvelous," Zek Lash purred. "A species so disorganized they can't even unify against an external threat. This will be over before our second meal cycle." The invasion plan was elegantly simple, as all good plans should be. 300 Vel'tari dreadnoughts would approach Earth in standard conquest formation. A few demonstration attacks on military targets would send the appropriate message. Within hours, the human governments would transmit their unconditional surrender, as all rational species did when faced with overwhelming technological superiority. "Deployment orders are as follows," Zek Lash announced, practically radiating confidence. "First wave, 50 ships to eliminate orbital defenses and major military installations. Second wave, 100 ships for atmospheric control and population centers. Third wave, the remaining vessels for mop-up operations and resource extraction." Golnox raised one of his 6 arms. "Sir, isn't this excessive? Our projections suggest 10 ships would be sufficient for complete planetary subjugation." Zek Lash's eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. "Excessive? My dear Golnox, this isn't about efficiency. This is about sending a message to the galaxy. When the Vel'tari Empire decides to expand, we don't just conquer, we dominate so thoroughly that other species surrender before we even arrive." The officers responded with approving growls and clicks. Oh, how they were going to enjoy watching these humans realize the futility of resistance. "Estimated time to complete conquest?" Thrix asked, already calculating supply requirements. 6 hours? Zek Lash replied without hesitation. 8, if they're particularly stubborn about accepting reality. How wrong he was going to be. The first wave of Vel'tari dreadnoughts descended through Earth's atmosphere with all the subtlety of a meteor shower. 50 massive ships, each one capable of glassing a continent. took position over major population centers. Zek Lash waited in his command chair, counting down the minutes until the inevitable surrender transmissions would flood their communication arrays. Hour 1 passed. Nothing. Hour 2. Still nothing. Thrix, Zek Lash called, his voice carrying the first hint of irritation. Are our communications working properly? Surely they've seen our ships by now. All systems operational, Commander, Thrix replied, double-checking his instruments. In fact, we are receiving transmissions from the planet. Excellent. Play the surrender broadcasts. What came through the speakers wasn't exactly what Zek Lash had expected. Instead of terrified pleas for mercy, the bridge was filled with laughter. Human laughter, followed by what their translation matrix could only describe as irreverent commentary. Oh, look honey, the aliens finally showed up, and they brought the whole fleet too. Someone's compensating for something, am I right? Dude, check out these spaceships. They look like someone crossed a squid with a hotel. 0 stars for design, would not recommend. Wait, are they seriously just hovering there? What are they waiting for? An invitation. Should we send them a fruit basket? Zek Lash's mandibles clicked in confusion. What are they doing? The transmissions continued, growing more bizarre by the minute. Humans were creating what their cultural analysis computers termed memes, crude digital images with text overlays mocking the invasion fleet. One particularly popular image showed a Vel'tari dreadnought with the caption, "Arrives to conquer planet. Forgets to bring conquer button." Commander Golnox interrupted, his voice tight with disbelief. We're detecting movement from several military installations, but they're not evacuating, they're mobilizing. Mobilizing? Zek Lash laughed, a sound like grinding metal. With what? Their chemical projectile weapons? That's when Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Corps proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is a human with absolutely nothing left to lose. Their squadron of atmospheric fighters, aircraft so primitive they still used combustion engines, it performed what should have been a suicide run against the dreadnought hovering over Mexico City. Sir. Thrix called out, alarm creeping into his voice. The primitive aircraft, are they not following any recognizable attack pattern? They're flying in completely random directions. Random, perhaps, but effective. Vasquez had figured out something the Vel'tari hadn't considered. Their targeting systems were designed for logical, predictable enemy movements. When faced with pilots who seemed to have no regard for physics, tactics, or basic self-preservation, the automated defenses simply couldn't keep up. One human fighter, flown by Sergeant Jake Morrison, actually managed to land on the hull of a Vel'tari cruiser. Not crash land. Actually land, as if the ship were an aircraft carrier. He then proceeded to exit his craft and attempt to break into the alien vessel using what appeared to be a crowbar. Is that human trying to manually breach our hull? Golnox asked, staring at the tactical display in bewilderment. With a primitive metal tool, Thrix confirmed, our sensors indicate he's making progress. But the true moment of alien existential crisis came during what would later be known as the shopping cart incident. In a suburb outside Denver, a group of humans had somehow weaponized wheeled metal baskets used for carrying groceries. They filled them with improvised explosives, set them rolling down a hill toward a landed Vel'tari transport, and it worked. The explosion wasn't powerful enough to destroy the ship, but it knocked out several critical systems and left a dozen Vel'tari soldiers questioning their life choices. Security footage, which humans immediately uploaded to their global information network, showed an elderly woman cheering and shouting something that roughly translated to, "Take that, you tentacled jerks." Commander Golnox said slowly, "I'm reading reports from multiple landing sites. The humans are using unconventional weapons, automobiles, construction equipment, sporting goods, kitchen utensils." Kitchen utensils? Zeke Lash repeated, his voice climbing several octaves. Apparently, a human-designated soccer mom Linda successfully disabled a reconnaissance drone with something called a rolling pin. Our technical analysts are confused. Zeklash stared at the tactical display, watching red warning indicators multiply across the screen. Human resistance wasn't just continuing, it was intensifying. And worse, it was completely unpredictable. Sir, Thrix added quietly, we're also receiving what appears to be musical transmissions directed at our fleet. Music? Yes, sir. The translation matrix identifies the primary message as "Welcome to Earth, now get the hell out." It's set to a particularly energetic rhythm. For the first time in his illustrious military career, Commander Zeklash found himself genuinely puzzled. This wasn't how conquests were supposed to go. Where was the fear? The rational assessment of overwhelming odds? The logical surrender? Instead, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Status report, he growled. Sir, Golnox replied reluctantly, we've successfully demonstrated our technological superiority. The humans have responded by laughing at us and fighting back with shopping carts. Zeklash's confidence wavered for the first time. This is unexpected. If Zeklash thought the shopping cart incident was the peak of human absurdity, he was about to learn a very uncomfortable lesson about underestimating a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and reality television. Commander Thrix called out, his voice carrying a note of panic that had never existed in Vel'tari military protocol. We have a situation developing at Landing Zone 7. Defined situation? Zeklash replied, though part of him already dreaded the answer. The humans have somehow acquired our plasma rifles. Impossible. Our weapons are biometrically locked to Vel'tari physiology. No other species can. Sir, they're not using them as intended, Thrix interrupted, which was itself unprecedented. Navigator officers did not interrupt fleet commanders. Ever. They've modified them. The tactical display showed tech specialist Amy Foster and her engineering team working with the frenzied energy of caffeinated graduate students facing a deadline. They had somehow gotten their soft, unprotected hands on 3 Vel'tari plasma rifles and were currently taking them apart with what appeared to be common hand tools. They're reverse engineering our technology, Golnox reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. In real time, without proper equipment, without understanding the theoretical foundations. They're just figuring it out as they go. Amy Foster, a woman who looked like she should be teaching elementary school rather than dismantling advanced alien weaponry, held up a glowing power core and grinned at her team. Okay guys, I think if we wire this through the truck's electrical system and route the plasma flow through the water cooling setup. She's building a weapon platform out of a primitive transport vehicle, Thrix whispered. 20 minutes later, that same truck was rolling toward a Vel'tari position with a jury-rigged plasma cannon mounted in its cargo bed. The weapon shouldn't have worked. The power requirements alone should have caused a catastrophic overload. Instead, it vaporized a reconnaissance drone and left a squad of Vel'tari soldiers scrambling for cover while Amy Foster whooped with joy from the driver's seat. But the technological adaptation was only the beginning of Zeklash's education in human resourcefulness. Commander Golnox reported, his voice climbing toward hysteria, the humans have breached our tactical communication frequencies. How? Our encryption is. They're not decrypting anything, sir. They're just broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. What followed was perhaps the most psychologically devastating attack in the history of interstellar warfare. Human voices flooded the Vel'tari command channels, not with military intelligence or strategic communications, but with earth music, stand-up comedy routines, and increasingly creative insults about Vel'tari anatomy. Attention ugly squid people, came one transmission. This is Earth Radio, playing all your favorite hits. Up next, we've got Squid Ink Blues, followed by My Tentacles Bring All the Nerds to the Yard. Dedicated to the fashion disasters currently floating over our cities. Sir, a shell-shocked communications officer reported Squad Leader Vrak'tho is requesting permission to surrender. He says the human music is corrupting his battle focus and he can't stop humming something called Baby Shark. The psychological warfare was effective, but it was nothing compared to what happened when humans began implementing what military historians would later call the Grandmother Protocol. Mrs. Betty Thompson was 73 years old, stood barely 5 feet tall, and had spent the last 40 years perfecting her knitting technique. When a Vel'tari scout ship landed in her backyard, crushing her prize-winning rose bushes, she took it personally. "Thrix," Zek Lash called weakly, "please tell me our sensors are malfunctioning." "I'm afraid not, sir." The elderly human female has successfully infiltrated scout ship Gamma 7 using what appears to be knitting implements. The security footage was surreal. Mrs. Thompson had somehow used her knitting needles to short-circuit the ship's door mechanisms. Once inside, she systematically disabled the crew, 3 trained Vel'tari soldiers, using a combination of knitting techniques and what she later described to reporters as the same way I deal with raccoons in my garbage. "She's taken them prisoner," Golnox reported in a voice that suggested he was questioning the fundamental nature of reality. "With yarn." "Yarn," Zek Lash repeated numbly. Apparently, human textiles are surprisingly effective restraints when applied by someone with sufficient motivation. The incident sparked what could only be described as a geriatric uprising across the planet. Elderly humans, apparently the most dangerous demographic that Vel'tari intelligence had somehow failed to identify, began emerging from retirement homes and suburban houses like battle-hardened veterans returning to war. A 90-year-old former teacher in Tokyo used her walker to trip 3 Vel'tari soldiers and then lectured them about proper behavior until they begged for extraction. In Florida, a group of retirees armed with golf clubs and lawn chairs successfully defended an entire shopping center. The footage of 80-year-old Frank Martinez hitting a Vel'tari drone with a 9-iron while shouting "Get off my lawn" became an instant global sensation. Commander Thrix said quietly, "I'm receiving reports that our soldiers are afraid of human elderly." "Afraid?" "Our soldiers are afraid of creatures that can barely walk without mechanical assistance." "Sir, Corporal Zixon reports that an elderly human female approached his position, offered him cookies, and then somehow convinced him to help her carry groceries. He's now emotionally attached and refuses to engage any humans who remind him of his grandmother." Zek Lash stared at the tactical display, watching his invasion markers turn from confident green to worried yellow to panicked red. In less than 6 hours, humans had reverse-engineered Vel'tari technology, weaponized their elderly population, and psychologically compromised his troops with music and baked goods. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zek Lash felt something he had never experienced before, genuine concern about the outcome of a battle. "Status report," he said quietly. "Sir," Golnox replied, consulting his increasingly alarming data streams, "we came here to conquer a primitive species. Instead, we appear to be losing to grandmothers with knitting needles and teenagers with truck-mounted plasma cannons." The silence on the bridge stretched uncomfortably long before Zek Lash spoke again. "This is not going according to plan." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come, assuming any Vel'tari officers survived to write the textbooks. Humans, it seemed, had taken the alien invasion as a personal challenge to demonstrate exactly how creative a species could get when their survival was on the line. Colonel Marcus Stone of the Earth Defense Corps was the kind of man who had spent his entire career preparing for impossible scenarios. Nuclear war, asteroid impacts, zombie apocalypses, he had contingency plans for everything. What he didn't have was a plan for alien invasion, but that had never stopped him before. "Gentlemen," Stone announced to his assembled officers, "the enemy expects us to fight like civilized beings. This is our first tactical advantage." His plan was elegant in its simplicity. Convince the aliens that humans were surrendering, then demonstrate why that was a terrible assumption. The first fake surrender operation targeted a Vel'tari ground command post that had been established in what used to be a shopping mall in Ohio. Commander Thrix reported, his voice carrying what Zek Lash was learning to recognize as the prelude to bad news. "We're receiving surrender transmissions from Grid Sector 12. Finally, some rational behavior. What are their terms?" They want to discuss terms in person. They're sending representatives with white flags." What arrived at the Vel'tari command post was a delegation of humans carrying white flags, boxes of what they claimed were traditional Earth surrender gifts, and smiles that should have been the first warning sign. The gifts turned out to be cleverly disguised explosives. The negotiators were actually demolitions experts, and the surrender ceremony became a tactical withdrawal that left 30 Vel'tari soldiers wondering what had just happened to their command center. They pretended to surrender, Gul Nox reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. Then they thanked us for accepting their surrender while simultaneously destroying our equipment. How is that even possible? Human social protocols appear to be far more complex than our analysis indicated, sir. They can apparently express gratitude and hostility simultaneously. The fake surrender operations became so successful that Vel'tari forces began refusing all human surrender attempts, which led to the logical next step in human tactical evolution, the pizza delivery massacre. Pilot Sarah Kim had been having a particularly frustrating day. Her F-16 had been shot down, her backup aircraft was being repaired, and the alien mothership hovering over Los Angeles was really starting to get on her nerves. So when she saw a pizza delivery truck abandoned by the side of the road, she did what any reasonable human would do. She stole it and decided to deliver some explosives to the aliens. Commander, a very confused communications officer reported, "We're receiving a food delivery request from the surface." Food delivery? A human female is requesting permission to board Dreadnought Alpha. She claims to have brought hot, fresh pizza for the hard-working alien invaders. She's asking if we prefer thin crust or deep dish. The logical response would have been to vaporize the delivery vehicle. Instead, the Vel'tari did what any spacefaring species would do when offered food by potentially friendly natives. They let curiosity override caution. Sarah Kim, dressed in a pizza delivery uniform and carrying what appeared to be thermal food containers, was escorted aboard the dreadnought by guards who had no idea that humans could weaponize literally anything, including Italian cuisine. The pizza boxes contained enough plastic explosive to cripple the ship's main engines. Sarah's cheerful demeanor right up until the moment she activated the detonators became the stuff of legend. She smiled. The surviving Vel'tari officer later reported, "She actually smiled and wished us bon appetit before jumping out an airlock." "Jumped out an airlock?" Zeklash repeated. "Without protective equipment, sir. She just jumped. Our sensors tracked her falling toward the surface, but she somehow deployed a primitive fabric parachute and landed safely." That was Zeklash's introduction to human adrenaline response systems. Sarah Kim hadn't just survived a 20,000-foot fall, she had planned for it, executed it flawlessly, and was apparently back on the ground organizing another delivery within hours. "Thrix," Zeklash called weakly. "What do we know about human biological stress responses?" "Very little, sir. Our preliminary scans indicated they were fragile creatures with limited physical capabilities. Reevaluate that assessment." The reevaluation revealed some disturbing facts. When threatened, humans experienced something called an adrenaline rush that temporarily increased their speed, strength, and pain tolerance to levels that bordered on the supernatural. They could function without sleep for days, survive injuries that should have been fatal, and continue fighting even when logic dictated they should have collapsed hours ago. Sir Gul Nox reported, reading from his updated biological analysis, "Human pain tolerance under stress conditions is unprecedented. We have reports of individuals continuing to fight with wounds that would incapacitate any Vel'tari soldier. Define continuing to fight." A human designated Sergeant Williams was observed engaging our forces for 6 hours after sustaining what should have been a fatal abdominal wound. When our medical scanners finally convinced him to seek treatment, he apologized for not being at full strength today. The sleep deprivation resistance was equally alarming. While Vel'tari soldiers required 8 hours of rest per day to maintain combat effectiveness, humans seemed to view sleep as an optional activity. Earth military units were operating around the clock, with some individuals staying alert and dangerous for 72 hours straight. "How are they doing this?" Zeklash demanded. "Caffeine, sir. What? A mild stimulant they extract from plant beans. They consume it in liquid form, often multiple times per day. Our analysis suggests it's mildly addictive and completely harmless. If it's harmless, how are they using it to maintain combat alertness for days? We don't know, sir. Human biochemistry is proving more complex than anticipated. By hour 18 of what was supposed to be a 6-hour conquest, Zeklash was facing the uncomfortable reality that his technologically superior force was being systematically outmaneuvered by a species that treated warfare like an extreme sport. They were using deception, improvisation, and biological advantages that no civilized species should possess. Status report, he said, though he was beginning to dread asking. Sir. Thrix replied, humans have infiltrated 12 of our ships using fake surrender protocols, food delivery services, and what appears to be door-to-door sales presentations. They've weaponized shopping carts, knitting needles, pizza, and something called glitter bombs. Our forces are reporting combat fatigue while the humans appear to be energized by the conflict. Zeklash closed all 4 of his eyes and tried to remember when warfare had become this complicated. By the 24th hour of what military historians would later call the day everything went wrong. Vel'tari forces were experiencing something that had never appeared in any of their psychological warfare manuals. It was complete existential breakdown in the face of an enemy that refused to follow the basic rules of logic. Commander, the ship's medical officer reported, his voice trembling, we have a situation in the barracks. Squad leader Tralvek has barricaded himself in a supply closet and refuses to come out. He keeps muttering about humans hiding in every shadow. Human paranoia syndrome, Golnox explained grimly. It's spreading through the ranks. Our soldiers are convinced that humans can appear anywhere, at any time, armed with any household object. The paranoia wasn't entirely unfounded. Humans had demonstrated an alarming tendency to survive situations that should have killed them through what could only be described as weaponized stubbornness. Private Tommy Chen became the poster child for this phenomenon when he crawled 3 miles through enemy territory with a compound fracture in his left leg, carrying enough explosives to level a city block. How? Zeklash asked, staring at the security footage that showed Tommy dragging himself across rough terrain for over 4 hours. How is he still conscious? How is he still moving? He appears to be motivated, sir, Thrix replied weakly. Our psychological analysts believe he's operating on what humans call spite. They're claiming it's one of their primary emotional fuel sources. The footage showed Tommy finally reaching his target, a Vel'tari communication relay, and proceeding to plant explosives while humming what their translation software identified as a cheerful earth tune about determination. He completed his mission, called for extraction, and when the medics finally reached him, his first words were, sorry for the delay, had to stop and rest a few times. Rest? Zeklash repeated. He considers that resting? The incident pushed Vel'tari morale past the breaking point. Formal requests for reassignment began flooding the command center, with soldiers begging to be transferred to safer assignments like black hole research or exploding star observation duty. Sir, a communications officer reported, we're receiving a priority transmission from High Command. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Supreme Admiral Kex Thuon, whose expression suggested he had been having an even worse day than Zeklash. Behind him stood the entire Vel'tari High Command, looking like beings who had just discovered that their fundamental understanding of the universe was completely wrong. Commander Zeklash, the Supreme Admiral, began, his voice carrying the weight of galactic authority and barely suppressed panic. Explain to me why our most elite invasion force is being defeated by a species that uses wheeled shopping containers as weapons. Sir, the humans are unconventional. Unconventional? Admiral Kex Thuon's mandibles clicked dangerously. Commander, we have reports of elderly humans knitting our soldiers into submission. We have footage of delivery personnel infiltrating our most secure vessels. Our troops are afraid to accept food, gifts, or basic social interaction because humans have somehow weaponized hospitality itself. The tactical situation is fluid, sir. Fluid? The Admiral's voice climbed several octaves. Commander, 3 of our dreadnoughts have been disabled by creatures who shouldn't be able to lift our smallest weapons. Our soldiers are requesting therapy for human-induced existential crisis. The Galactic Council is receiving reports that we're losing a war to beings who fight with kitchen utensils and pure stubbornness. The silence stretched uncomfortably before the Admiral continued. Commander Zek Lash, in your professional military opinion, what exactly are we dealing with here? Zek Lash looked at his tactical displays, showing red warning indicators across every sector, listened to the background reports of new human innovations in unconventional warfare, and gave the only honest answer he could. Sir, I believe we have encountered a species that treats the impossible as a personal challenge. The Admiral's expression suggested this was not the answer he had been hoping to hear. Desperation, Zek Lash decided, was an ugly emotion on any species. After 36 hours of systematic humiliation at the hands of beings who fought with pizza boxes and knitting needles, he was ready to abandon all pretense of a civilized conquest. Golnox, he commanded, prepare the orbital bombardment array. If these humans want to play with improvised weapons, let's see how they handle planetary sterilization. Sir, that will eliminate all life on the surface. Exactly. No more shopping carts, no more delivery trucks, no more elderly females with yarn-based weapons. We glass the planet and move on with our lives. The bombardment array powered up with a satisfying hum of barely contained destruction. Enough firepower to turn continents into molten slag, focused on a species that had somehow turned household items into instruments of war. Targeting systems locked, sir, Golnox reported. Initiating planetary bombardment in 3-2. Commander. Thrix interrupted, his voice cracking with panic. Massive energy readings from the surface. They're powering up something. The tactical display exploded with warnings as every sensor array screamed alerts. From hidden installations across Earth's surface, energy signatures were rising that shouldn't have existed on a pre-spaceflight world. That's impossible, Zek Lash whispered. They don't have the technology for planetary defense systems. Sir, Golnox said quietly, they do now. In that moment of absolute technological impossibility, Zek Lash finally understood what made humans truly dangerous. It wasn't their creativity, their stubbornness, or their ability to weaponize pizza delivery. It was something far more terrifying. They had been preparing for this invasion since the moment his ships appeared. While his forces had been dealing with shopping cart attacks and grandmother militias, human scientists had been reverse engineering every piece of Vel'tari technology they could get their hands on. The pizza delivery infiltrations hadn't just been sabotage, they had been intelligence-gathering missions. Commander, Thrix reported in a voice barely above a whisper, the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. Surrender terms? Zek Lash asked hopefully. No, sir. Tourist information for visiting Earth's solar system. Apparently, they're already planning interstellar expansion. As the Vel'tari fleet retreated in complete disarray, Zek Lash realized the most terrifying truth of all: humans didn't just survive the impossible. They learned from it, adapted to it, and then used it as a stepping stone to do something even more impossible. Behind them, Earth's newly constructed defense satellites powered down, and somewhere in the distance, humans were probably already building their first starship out of shopping carts and determination.